New York's position on gun violence and access to guns continues to evolve. On July 1st, Governor Hochul introduced new gun legislation to replace the law overturned by the Supreme Court. That law, which limits the possession of firearms in so-called sensitive places, is already being challenged in court. But now to this week's news, where I'm happy to be joined at the Reporters Roundtable by Marina Villeneuve of the Associated Press and Jimmy Vielkind from the Wall Street Journal. Thanks very much for coming in. All right, so let's talk about the departure of Chief Judge Janet DiFiore. After about 6.5 years in office, former Westchester County prosecutor, former chairwoman of the aforementioned Joint Commission on Public Ethics, appointed by Governor Cuomo at the end of 2015, took office at the beginning of 2016, and in a surprise announcement, leaving at the end of August.
I think that there are a couple of reasons that played into her departure, and according to my reporting. One is that she has been pushing for a court consolidation plan to take New York's 11 trial court parts and basically consolidate them into two, a Supreme Court and some sort of a lower court. And that really failed to gain traction this year during the legislative session. That's something that people said she put a lot of time and effort into, and it was essentially sort of floating in the water. Not dead, but certainly not steaming along. Her, of course, biggest rabbi was former Governor Andrew Cuomo, who appointed her in 2016 when she was the Westchester County District Attorney. But she really soured her relationship with legislators, many of them said, when she ruled in April about the legislative and congressional district lines. DiFiore, for viewers who might not remember, ruled that the lines violated a constitutional anti-gerrymandering provision, but that the legislature could not be trusted to take another crack at this process, that it should be remanded to a lower court who appointed a special master to draw the maps. So she had a macro problem in terms of her political support. And then on top of that, the Wall Street Journal and other outlets reported that she was the subject of a Judicial Conduct Commission probe at the time of her resignation. According to people familiar with the matter that my colleague Corinne Remy and I spoke with, the commission voted in June to issue a formal written complaint against Judge DiFiore related to a letter she sent to a disciplinary hearing officer who was weighing a disciplinary charge against the head of the court officers union, a guy named Dennis Quirk. So DiFiore and Quirk had sort of a long-running spat, and the letter had some very stark language wherein Judge DiFiore essentially urged the hearing officer to throw the book at Quirk.
Very thumb-on-scale language, without a doubt.
Yes, it was not subtle, we shall say.
Yeah. Okay, so Janet DiFiore is headed out the door. This sets up, of course, an opportunity for Governor Hochul to put her own stamp on the court in a pretty big way. Chief judges don't come along every year, certainly. The average length of time for service is about 5 to 7 years, I guess, with the exception being Judith Kaye, who served for much longer, more than a decade. So, Marina, this sets up a classic sort of progressive versus centrist option for the governor. Is that right?
Right. At this point, after Governor Hochul's new nomination, she'll have picked 2 out of 7 of the members of the Court of Appeals, with 5 being appointed by Cuomo. There's been a lot of analysis about what the courts looked like under DiFiore. We've seen the number of criminal appeals drop dramatically. So we're hearing a lot of calls from criminal justice reform groups and legal aid groups for the governor to use this opportunity to pick a public defender and someone from underrepresented background to really try to tilt the court in a different direction. But obviously the governor is running for a 4th term, so she's going to be facing pressure as well to perhaps go more moderate, especially when she's getting so much criticism from Republicans and more moderate members of her party over crime rates in the state.
Her nominee will have to be approved by the state Senate, which means that it's quite likely that we'll get another extraordinary session where they'll come back and have to question and then vote on that nominee, correct?
That's right. And the way the process works is there's first a Commission on Judicial Nomination that will hear and vet various candidates and then presents the governor with a list of people from which she will make her selection. Historically, these Senate confirmations have not been particularly contentious. There were several no votes over the appointment in 2021 of former Nassau County District Attorney Madeline Singas. That was, of course, Andrew Cuomo's pick for a seat on the Court of Appeals that he did sort of while he was under significant pressure and during the period in which his gubernatorial tenure was coming under lots of stress because of the investigations of his handling in the pandemic, as well as his grappling with accusations of sexual harassment. So we heard some dissent in the state Senate then from some of the more progressive members. I think it remains to be seen whether there will be significant dissent and also whether Governor Hochul will be mindful of that when she makes her selection.
All right, let's move on to the topic of guns and ongoing blowback to the legislation recently passed and signed into law by the governor. Carl Paladino, the singular, I think would be the lowest level adjective I could pick, congressional candidate out in Western New York who's locked in a primary battle with Nick Langworthy, the chair of the state party, has announced that he is going to bring suit against aspects of the new gun law. Correct?
Right. It's a federal lawsuit, and it's taking aim specifically at part of the law that will say for a business, any business that wants to allow concealed carry will have to affirmatively put up a sign saying, essentially, guns are welcome here. And he's saying that that's going too far and infringing on Second Amendment rights by requiring businesses to do so. The governor, for her part, has said that she's confident this will hold up in court. I've spoken with experts from gun control groups like Giffords and Brady, and they've pointed to there being legal precedent for this, perhaps, in just looking at private property rights. And in some localities nationwide, there are requirements saying that you have to alert a private property owner if you're going to be bringing guns on the property. So we'll have to see.
Meanwhile, Carl Paladino, it seems like every couple of weeks there's another one of these. This time out, it was reported that he has registered sex offender, somebody convicted almost a decade ago of possessing child pornography, who is serving not only in his private business interests, but also as, I believe, assistant treasurer on his campaign, which is, I believe, what we call an unforced error in politics.
Yeah, the Paladino campaign said that this person just appeared on a document and is not formally affiliated with the campaign. It's unclear. It seems that the individual in question had granted money to Paladino's political efforts, as you noted, worked for Ellicott Development, the company that he founded and that is now managed and run by his son. You know, this is a nasty campaign that Carl Paladino finds himself in. Nick Langworthy, who is the principal opponent in the Republican nomination for this congressional seat that had been held by Chris Jacobs, he's sharp, and so this is going to be very bare-knuckled. What is an open question for me is whether any of this is going to resonate with the GOP electorate and whether it's going to matter. Carl Paladino, Casey, we've been talking about Carl Paladino for well over a decade at this point.
About 13 years now.
It should not be a surprise to any viewer or any voter that Carl Paladino has some rough edges. Carl Paladino is not politically correct. That Carl Paladino has some sort of pushing the envelope associations and statements that he makes. And voters have, to use a market term, they've priced that in. That is part of his appeal. And so I don't know the extent to which this kind of revelation or other revelations that will come out, of course, in the course of a vigorous campaign are going to impact him. I also have no idea who's going to vote in an August special election for Congress.
Yeah, very few people, one imagines. So, all right, well, that's where we're going to have to leave it. Thanks very much to Marina Villeneuve of the Associated Press and Jimmy Vilkind of the Wall Street Journal. Great to see you.